Hello. Trying to get more steps in lately, so my toddler doesn't let me put her in the stroller anymore for walks, so it's kind of impossible to get steps in. So I've just been letting her go outside, and then I just walk circles in the yard until I reach a certain amount of steps, or until she gets too irritated and wants to go back inside. So that's what we're doing, and it's good to do this earlier in the morning before the sun gets too bad, because it's in California here, and I think I might be getting like skin cancer or pre-cancer on my lips or something. I have an appointment with a dermatologist in a couple months to see. It's just been like super freaking dry and uncomfortable every day, no matter what I do. So I've been putting on a lot of sunscreen and trying to avoid the sun and eating omega-3s and stuff. But we'll see. So I just wanted to say, kind of reiterate what I think a person should do to avoid what happened to me. I guess as a coping mechanism for me to like relive what I went through and see like where my fault was. Although really none of it was my fault, but to try to give advice to somebody else so they don't end up in the same spot I was, I would say get a doula, 100%. Make sure that doula has had a child themselves and has some experience under their belt. And make sure they understand the concept of spinning babies, because most babies are going to come out. You know, they're descending, they're positioned appropriately, they're going to come out. There's not going to be any problems. You're hiring them to help you when there are problems, when the positioning isn't optimal, when you're trying to avoid a C-section due to positioning challenges. So make sure they can help you with that, and most of them can. Make sure there's a plan in place for if they're like sick, who's going to possibly take over for you, how that's going to look. Another thing, if you can get a provider that's going to actually see you through your pregnancy and then delivery, somebody you can build rapport with, I think that is shown in the research over and over again for being a huge advantage. I went to a group where there's a lot of doctors. There was no way I could have interviewed all of them, but the few I did see, and I thought they were kind of all on the same page. The few I did see, but obviously that one wasn't on the same page in terms of natural birth. And I had just a really straightforward birth plan that was just a single page, and it shouldn't have been offensive to anyone or, ridiculous. But I would say, yeah, make a straightforward birth plan with your like must-have wishes. But just know that it just depends if they even read it. Some of them have respect for patients and some of them don't. So make sure you get somebody that respects people who want to go natural, if that's what your choice is. Do not rely on your support person to help you through labor. I think that was a huge mistake of mine. I thought my husband was on the same page as me. I thought he was paying attention to my nursing stories in terms of like how bad the hospital can be. But turns out he wasn't paying attention and didn't really know what I thought he knew. He didn't know we could kick our nurses out. He didn't know we could ask for different nurses. So, that was all put back on me in terms of advocating for myself. When you're in labor, it's kind of like when you plan a wedding. If you're planning your own wedding, you're not going to be the one out there directing traffic, making sure everything goes smoothly. You're going to be sitting in the dressing room waiting for your cue, and then you go. And you're just hoping that the people who heard your plan did it the way you wanted it. If you didn't hire a wedding planner. I didn't hire a wedding planner. And I was like, it's kind of the same thing. It's like you're planning this birth, but when it comes to you going through it, you're not going to be able to advocate for yourself once you're in a certain level of pain and exhaustion, which happens to most women. So that's why you hire these people to help you. Your nurses I wouldn't rely on because they could just be crappy. Your doctor I wouldn't rely on. That's why you need to hire a doula. I think they're worth their weight in gold. You can always make more money. Your birth might kill you or your baby. So that's very good time to invest in somebody who could advocate for you. and make sure they're strong at advocating and they're not somebody who's weak and who's just gonna let things happen to you. And honestly, our maternity system's so screwed up, you shouldn't have to do this. But some insurances actually help cover a doula, so you can look into that. But even if that's not the case, I would still advocate for getting one. And you know, your husband might be perfect in the delivery room. He might be doing just the correct things, but he may not, because he might get scared because you might be in the most pain he's ever seen you in. And that might freak him out. Like my husband, he just didn't know what to do. I was also yelling at him. So I'm sure he was trying, and he wasn't like taking the lead and leading me to a path of less pain and peacefulness, you know. So that's what the doula is for. So don't rely on your husband. Your husband might be great. He might do a better job than mine did. But I've heard a lot of stories where women are just like, my husband did nothing for me. And the husband feels like he tried, but he didn't know. And, you know, they don't have the education. You know, doulas, they do a certain amount of hours of education, and then they have to certify, and then they have, well, sometimes, some places they don't do all this, but they have a certain amount of births they attend and stuff like that. So they have more qualifications than your husband does. I think your husband should be in the room if that's what will help you, but I don't think you should be solely responsible for helping you through pain, because that's what you need. And the whole point of having a game plan for getting through pain, which I thought I had a game plan, but I guess I didn't communicate that well enough with him. Like I packed a TENS unit, and I packed a birth comb, and I packed, you know, these like lacrosse balls that you could shove onto my hips and stuff. Packed a fan, packed a heating pad, stuff like that, snacks. All of that is good, but you also have to tell your spouse and your doula, this is what I want for pain control. Try all of these before we start doing the epidural. And I'm not against epidurals. I think they're a good tool. And I was like very tense until I got the walking epidural, and then I was able to dilate a little bit more. I don't know if that was necessary to dilate, but in my case, it seemed like it was. But I think the goal should be as minimal of pain pharmacologic help as you could possibly get, so that you can stay in control of your movement and to stay in communication with your body. Because if your baby gets stuck, you need to move to get him out. So that was my downfall, is I couldn't move to get the baby out. And when I started moving again, and I turned the epidural off in the last 2 hours or 90 minutes or so of my birth, you know, the same nurses I kicked out, who I said, don't come back in unless I call you, they came back in because I took myself off the monitor, which I'm allowed to do as a patient. And they were, you know, trying to get me back in the bed, and it just screwed up my peace. And then I was right back into the tense mode and the pain, wanted the epidural back. But I had been pushing, and I was feeling like I was making progress. And I did make progress. I went from 0 station to +1 station. So that means the baby was on its way out. +3 is when you're crowning. So I was almost there. And it's really rare to C-section somebody at +1 station. So, you know, had I been allowed to continue with that, I think I would have been successful. But you know, fear was in my mind. Like, they're telling me I'm having some variable D cells, which not very many happened. And they're not allowing me to have a scalp electrode. So even though we're not monitoring correctly, I'm basing my fear off of this information. So, you know, at that point I was like, well, I did my thing to try. Didn't work. I guess we'll C-section now because I want to have a live baby. And I'm worried that I won't if I keep pushing, you know. So that's what I did. And it's like, you can't really fault me for that decision because I did put my baby first. Unfortunately, it almost cost me my life. But, you know, any mom will say, if this is what it costs to have a baby safely, I'll do it. But a lot of times it's not what is the actual cost. It's like, you should be able to do this vaginally. Obviously there's times for C-section, and even positionally, there might be a time for a C-section that's totally justified. Maybe mine was totally justified, but early recognition of physician challenges and early intervention is key. And when your water breaks fully, it's very hard to get the baby to move. There are options they have in the hospital to do like an amnio infusion where they re-give you more fluids to try to help float the baby. None of that was offered to me. It was like, well, you can just struggle, and then whenever you give up, we'll cut you open. So I had no idea I was in a hospital that would treat me that way. I thought I would be flooded with options for natural delivery, and it's like I had to beg them for different options. So, and I had no idea the hospital would be that way. But it was a high-risk hospital, so I would recommend. It had a good NICU, and that's why I made that choice, just in case, because I thought, anything could happen. I want to make sure the baby's okay. But looking back, it's like I probably should have gone to the hospital with a low C-section, right? Because babies tend to be healthier, better if you can just deliver them naturally. But it just depends. So anyway, get a doula, go through your natural childbirth class with your husband, read the books, get a bunch of things for pain relief, talk to your husband about what the plan is with each of these things, do drills, explain to him that you're going to be in so much pain that you're not really there anymore, and he's going to have to take the lead. And also reiterate that you really do just need a doula because they're better at this. Your husband's going to do what he can, but, maybe the doula can get him involved so that you're more comfortable. But I think husbands kind of drop the ball on helping with birth sometimes. So that's why you should hire a doula. And I wish I had. And in my case, I should have stayed out of the hospital for as long as possible. But they told me because my water broke with a huge gush, that I should come in because I could be compressing the cord and they want to monitor. And as soon as I was there, they just put me in a triage room for like 6 hours or so. I don't know. It was the first part of the morning and they didn't have a bed until day shift. So I think I got there at like 4 in the morning. So I should have been like, dang, I could have just slept at home and then come in when I wake up, and that would have been better for me to do because then I would have had some sleep. But, they were scaring me, saying like, you should come in. What if the cord prolapses? What if you have a compression of the cord or something like that? We need a monitor. And then they did Q15-minute monitoring once I was in my room. So now I think we should just get fetal monitors ourselves, even though a lot of nurses say don't do that. Not to check for low fetal movement. If you have low fetal movement, go in and get assessed. But if your labor started with water breaking and they're telling you come into the hospital so we can monitor you, why not just monitor at home? Make sure you're having good fetal movement and good heart rate. Check for every 15 minutes for an hour. If you're doing okay, go to bed. If you're doing okay, relax. If you're doing okay, do a mild circuit at home. Don't get into this mindset like, I gotta get to the hospital now before contractions get bad. I think it's better to just be in pain on your way to the hospital than to, go before you've really got labor going. No, Ren. Okay. Just getting into the cat food. So, I wish I would have stayed home longer and kind of developed a routine with my labor with my husband prior to going into the hospital. See, my whole plan was my water wasn't going to break first thing and my baby was going to be positioned the right way, but that didn't happen. And I was going to have my OB that I picked. That didn't happen. So, learn from my mistakes. Have a doula, stay at home for as long as possible, rest, especially towards the end of pregnancy. Do not do heavy workouts. You have nothing to prove. Whatever strength you gain in that last little bit of pregnancy is going to go away as soon as you're, recovering after having the baby. So just let it go. There's plenty of time in life to get strong. You don't need to do that while you're 9 months pregnant on your due date, like me. And, some cultures, they say, the nesting period gets you ready for your birth because you're on your hands and knees cleaning. So I would recommend that, if you feel like working out, if you got a lot of energy all of a sudden, just get on your hands and knees and start mopping your floor and then take a nap. And that's probably all you need to do. Eat really, really good. And make sure your snacks are ready to go. Make sure you got 2 birthing combs. And do what you can. Also, I had the hospital gown on for birth because I thought, oh, I don't need to buy like one of those birthing dresses that people get to feel more comfortable. I'm like, that's ridiculous. It's just going to get messy. But I was so uncomfortable because those things open in the back, obviously. And because I wanted to be in hands and knees. So I was just flashing my butt for everybody to see. And people walk in like nothing. And I know as a nurse that's ridiculous. You should knock on the door and kind of wait for allowance to be entered into the birth space. But they don't do that. They just come in. They don't announce who they are. You know, they may not even be there for you. They may be there for the nurse. But, you know, it's really unsettling when you're trying to, like, get into the zone of birthing and your butthole is visible for everybody to see. And I kept telling my husband, just put a sheet over me. And he's like, well, it keeps falling down. And I'm like, okay, then pick it back up. So I just had no good help, which is really awful. So learn from my mistakes. And then if something does go wrong, don't blame yourself, because that's what I do all day long. I just blame myself. And what I've realized is if I was my nurse, I wouldn't have allowed myself to be in so much pain and not assessed position of the baby and not tried different positions. Like, there's so much more intervention I would have done. And I never say no to a patient. Like, I listen to them, and if they have a good idea, I'll say, well, let's talk it over with the doctor. Let's see what we can do. I try to work with people. So it's like, this isn't my fault. I was put in a really ridiculous situation where I wasn't listened to at all. I wasn't respected at all, even though I have medical training and I understand high risk obstetrics and stuff like that. It just didn't matter. They just ignored me. Even when I was hemorrhaging, it's like, I don't need any further evidence that these people screwed up my labor. And then when I was on my own, my husband keeps reminding me this, I progressed. I did so much better by myself than I did with other people around me. And I could handle the pain. And so that's a big thing. It's like if you're at your house kind of establishing labor and you're handling some pain by yourself, and then especially if you've got like hypnosis things, affirmations, which I always thought was ridiculous. I'm like, I don't need that. You do need that. You need to start playing that stuff towards the end of your pregnancy and like, I can do this. I'm strong. I was built for this, you know? And I know a lot of people don't like that wordage because it's kind of shaming women who don't do it naturally. But honestly, it is true. Most of the time you are built for this unless you were malnourished in childhood or you have a genetic difference that made your pelvis not compatible with birth. If you've had injury to your pelvis, you should be able to do it. And then there's just some complications that can arise with the baby that would require a C-section. And if that happens, you know, that's just nature. And that's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not something that you should feel bad about. But if you're going for natural and you're low risk and you have no reason not to go natural, it's like, get the affirmations, the different kinds of oils that you can infuse so you can smell them. The volunteer doula that was at the hospital put some like peppermint and some clary sage on a cotton ball for me to smell when I was nauseous and when I was having pain and I was struggling. One of them made me sick and the other one helped me, and I don't remember which one. So look into different kind of smelly things and like pre-douse your cotton swabs, or like just bring the bottles and some cotton swabs and tell your doula that you want to use these, or have your husband use it, or maybe your doula already has this stuff. And just every little resource you can use to kind of lessen the harm that is you're feeling in your body will help you get through the next contraction. Cervical checks too. I feel like my cervical checks were sometimes painful and also very unhelpful because nobody told me that she was OP until the very end. And all it did was reduce my faith in myself that I could do it, because they said something like, well, you're only 2 centimeters after like 13 hours of horrible pain or whatever. And I'm like, there's no way I can keep doing this. Like, I'm not even close to 10. And then I have to push. Like, I need something to get through this, because right now I'm trying and I am just at 2. but I was 80% effaced, and you efface before you dilate. So it's like I was right there ready to start dilating a lot, but you know, in my mind, all I heard was 2, and that totally broke my spirit. And I went from like, I can do this to I can't do this. This is the worst pain in my life. And so my husband even saw that, and he's like, man, that really broke your spirit. And yet I continued to get more cervical checks that were just more disappointing. But, you know, sometimes cervical checks tell you important information, but sometimes they just hurt your labor. So I'd say probably just avoid them if you can. Mama. But I have a beautiful baby now, and I'm very, very thankful for that. Okay, I'll be done.